He was the American dream, baby, the son of a plumber who made it all the way to the top of the mountain and became NWA World Champion. There's no doubt Dusty Rhodes' career is stellar, and when he joined the world's largest promotion, the real big time, the WWF, he probably thought it was only going to get better. Well, that wasn't quite the case. Instead, he had a short, polka-dotted run that fizzled out and basically ended his in-ring career. But it could have been different, right? Today, we look to give Dusty a true, fitting final chapter to his in-ring career. Welcome to Rebooking the Territory podcast. This is your host, Luke Thayer, the wrestling podcast that goes back and changes the past and makes it the way it should have been. My guest this week, he's a returning co-host. He's almost, it's like back in the day when Johnny Carson had the permanent fill-in host with Jay Leno and Gary Shandling. That's kind of like what we have going on this week. And so I want everyone to welcome my guest this week, Andrew Schwartztol, the returning.
Good to be Gary Shandling. Yes. Anytime I can even be like somewhat in the universe, just like saying Gary Shandling, and I'm somewhere in that subject line. He's the best. But thank you. Yes, it's good to
Absolutely.
Be here. Gosh darn it. Very happy to be here. I wish they could see what I'm looking at right now. Got some polka dots behind you. Got some
I know. That's a little hint to everyone listening to the podcast today of what we will be talking about. We are going to talk about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, baby. And he's a wonderful, wonderful performer. And
yes.
I think we all, even modern wrestling fans, have a strong love of Dusty Rhodes because of all the work he did in NXT and, all of the modern wrestlers that love Dusty and say how they helped his career. But we're going to focus on a very specific portion of his career. We're going to talk about his WWF run, late 80s. And I think that first, before we go into rebooking, we always like to talk about the wrestler a little bit or the event. And for Dusty, I can tell you my first memory of Dusty Rhodes ever, of any sort of performance of him at all in my life, is WrestleMania 6.
Yeah.
Like it is, on just about every one of these podcasts, I end up referring back to WrestleMania 6. The sweet Sapphire was with him, baby. And Macho Man and Sensational Sherry, Scary Sherry Martel. They had the mixed tag match, and that was my first introduction to Dusty Rhodes.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you, right around there. I mean, I know I've said this before. The only difference is that I really started watching in '92, but I mean, when wrestling came into my life, it just completely took over. And I mean, there was an entire summer just dedicated to watching old Coliseum videos. Mm-hmm. And I it's right there with me with Dusty. I will say, for me, one of the, and I mean this, dude, it's funny because I'm kind of like just putting this together right now. The way Dusty, and it's weird because I've been, of course, when we decide, what we're going to maybe, be talking about, I look into some stuff, but I didn't even think about this until you started doing a very well done Dusty impression. I grew up with a bad lisp, like a serious lisp, like bad, like stuttered a lot. Couldn't even really talk until I was like 4.5 or something. And I remember it's one of those things where it even if you can't put it together at a young age, I loved how Dusty spoke because it honestly was kind of how I spoke. So I remember having an instant relatability with him. And I have a feeling this is going to be something we touch on, a 10-year-old Andrew Schwartztol, handsome devil he was, a 10-year-old Andrew Schwartztol probably wouldn't need to rebook Dusty in '89. I think a 10-year-old Andrew Schwartztol was very pleased with him. The polka dots, just it's full on attraction, special attraction, full on just absolute center of the universe when he pops in. I think it's when you get older and you become a little more cynical, and it's not just about everything that's in front of you, but it's like, what are they, what is happening around it. So that's kind of, I think as a kid, I love what they did with him. But then as you get older, you kind of realize there was a waste, kind of a waste of opportunity.
Yeah, what's interesting, you spoke like Dusty Rhodes as a child, and I looked like Dusty Rhodes as a child, or had the body up. I had the body, and you had the mouth.
Yeah,
Dusty Rhodes. The two of us combined probably had lots of friends.
Oh yeah,
at that age, and so
imaginary.
he's an interesting cat, because I know as a kid I wasn't necessarily thinking of him, and I kind of like your point about like, 10-year-old Andrew. Well, I feel like that 10-year-old me thought Dusty Rhodes was fun,
Yeah,
but definitely not one of my favorite wrestlers, and he also felt very old. And it's something that I've said this with many people. I may have said it on the podcast before, is that when you're a child, anybody that's like 20 years old and above seems ancient. Like they seem like 20-year-olds seem like full-on adults. 30-year-olds seem like that's a parent level age. 40 and above is just like your grandpa. Like you don't have 40 and 80 don't feel that off.
Grandpa Dusty. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this is the Hulk Hogan era. This is the Ultimate Warrior era. This was bodies. Even some of the lower card talent, you had like the Barbarian or the Warlord that were just these big bodies. And then you have Dusty Rhodes, who is all charisma and all, it's just the bravado that he brings is something that many of the bodies couldn't bring. I mean, just imagine if you had Dusty Rhodes' charisma and personality and you put that inside of the Warlord.
Yeah.
Then you would have had a Hulk Hogan level, talent.
Yeah.
Or instead, you've got a guy who, when entering the WWF, he's a mid-card guy for Vince and below at times. And you look at his previous history, and I think it's important to note for the audience, to realize how big a star Dusty Rhodes was. He was a 3-time champion, NWA champion. He's carrying that belt. He's beating Harley Race. He's having major feuds with Ric Flair, who, by the way,
legendary.
Yeah. And legendary. And also another man with kind of a speech impediment that they just go back and forth.
Yeah.
And they're two of the best talkers ever. And so clearly any sort of things that the world might deem as a disability can ultimately be something that can benefit you if you take a perceived weakness and turn it into a strength. And so, which Andrew, yourself, you have done.
So, thank you.
We've got these guys who are just talking people into the building. They're just all charisma, and clearly probably somebody that I imagine that Vince McMahon would have wanted, because Dusty actually wrestled for his father, Vince Sr., in the WWF a little bit, had Superstar Billy Graham matches and headlined the Madison Square Garden. So he wasn't completely unknown.
And he was innovative too.
Very.
He was known for his booking. He was known for taking chances. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, he was very a very unique talent.
Well, that's important to. I'm glad you did interrupt to say, because he's creating these big pay-per-view events, Starrcade, Bash, Beach,
it's crazy. Yeah,
Great American Bash. I'm not sure exactly all the ones that he did, but without looking at it, but basically anything that you see in the 80s and 90s of WCW, this guy created a large chunk of them.
And what's amazing about a guy like Dusty back then and a guy like Ric Flair is how much they were able to do with a clearly, much smaller platform than a Hogan had or a Savage had or a Warrior had. It's and that's why, there aren't, I mean, obviously there were some other stars from that era, but it's really Dusty and Flair. They were basically the two biggest non-WWF stars of the 80s. I mean, unless if I'm missing someone, Sting didn't come on until, first of all, I'm not even talking WCW though, because that's even different because they had more resources once it became WCW. That in itself makes, you would think this like amazing commodity, this amazing get. And you know what I kept thinking of today? It's kind of, I think, he comes in 89. Dusty comes in 89. And when the WWF is still booming, they're killing it. And I think he wanted him, but I think Vince was like, kind of wanted him on his own terms, because why not? I think we've talked about this before. For most of the, 84 through 90 run, mostly everything Vince touched was gold, or the stuff that mattered. So he kind of feels like, oh, polka dots, I can do whatever I want. It's going to work. But you know what I've been thinking about? I think he learned, because I'll actually, and sometimes like present day booking they don't get that much credit, but AJ, it kind of reminds me of AJ Styles. Obviously they're different and they're, different builds and all that, but AJ Styles was the biggest name not in the WWE. Mm-hmm. And Vince gets AJ Styles. And if you watched AJ in TNA, it's not like they didn't dismantle him. They kind of let AJ just be AJ. I mean, you think about how like AJ was introduced, right? Amazing pop at the Royal Rumble, like using his same, phenomenal one and all that. But with Dusty, what do? They make these like cheap, because Dusty and I know we'll talk more about this, but Dusty's like, the common man, which is great. It's one of the greatest promos ever. But what do they do with him? They do these like silly, he's a pizza guy. Then in one thing, he's a plumber. This is all before he actually wrestles. And it's like, I think Vince, I don't know if Vince put this together. I like to speak about him sometimes, like I'm like his therapist, but I think he might have learned, like, if we're going to get someone who is dominating and they're not with us, we don't need to, dissect it and try to make, and he's had some people that he's ruined, especially people who come from NXT, but he let AJ just be AJ. He didn't let Dusty just be Dusty. And I think that's a big problem. Dusty was, even like I'm looking at, like a picture of him in the NWA and a picture of him in WWF. Dusty basically had the same build, but he's not wearing a shirt. It's a far cry from the WWF build, right? And I think Vince was like, we can't have that. So we're going to distract his physique with polka dots, and just unfortunate.
Yeah, it's, I would almost say that Dusty has what Vince would view as a heel body.
Yeah.
It's like this, I mean, if you're going to show this thing off, you've got to be, a heel. You got to be somebody who's gross, or, you're not somebody that people want to see. And so cover it up, if that makes perfect sense why you would see him in these polka dots and large outfits and a weird sort of loose fitting singlet.
It's just so, I'm sorry, it's just so bizarre to me. Can we just talk about the polka dots for a second?
Sure.
So he's a common man, right? He's an American man. He's an American dream. How did they even come up with the polka dots? Like, what was going on in that meeting? It just seems like such a far cry. It's like if someone was like wanting to, and there's really nobody wanting to do this, but if it's like, if somebody was wanting to do, something about, Andrew Schwartztol. I'm going to keep talking about me like I'm in the third person, like I'm The Rock. And they want to, do something that kind of, I don't know, let's just say like captures my nebbishiness, AKA Jew. And they want to, right? So they have this plan. This is going to be, the neurotic Jew, right? It's planned. That's what they're going to do. And then, so they decide what my costume's going to be, right? And they decide to give me like, I don't know, a velvet robe with pumpkins. It just doesn't make any sense. The neurotic Jew, velvet robe, and pumpkins. And I by the way, I'm kind of just pitching what I think should be my wrestling persona, and that's neurotic Jew. But you know what? I'm like, how did they even come up with that? It doesn't make any sense to me.
The polka dot thing is.
Was it big in '89? Were polka dots big in '89?
It's more so than now, but I don't know that they've ever been that popular.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like any other wrestlers were coming out there. It wasn't like Ultimate Warrior was coming out with neon polka dots, and you go, "Oh, that makes sense."
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know where the polka dots come from. I think that even when I've heard like Bruce Pritchard or anybody else talk about it, they're never.
Yeah, what does he say?
It always feels like there's no real explanation for it. It kind of feels like, well, they're polka dots, so they're cool. It's like, oh, come on now, that's not an answer. If you gave that answer in school, they would say, well, that's not sufficient answer.
Yeah,
you got to actually tell us what it is. And so, I mean, it's glossy, it's big. I get it. Like, it is 80s. It just doesn't make any sense why they wanted to give it to Dusty, who like is not far removed from, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, his character was like, he was truly like, he was the everyman. He stuck up for the everyman. He was bare boned. He was just, kind of not a larger than life character, right? Like, and Vince just decided to Vincify him. And, but the amazing thing about it was he still got a huge pop. That's the thing. The fans still dug it. And he's, you watch some of this stuff and he's going out there in the polka dots and he's dancing around. He's giving it his all. And it feels like, even if it was a rib or, that they're just trying to like bury Dusty Rhodes here with this stuff, he goes out and gets it over. You're going to throw me in polka dots and make me look like a fool. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make it so good that people are going to love it. And I think that's part of my nostalgia looking back at Dusty Rhodes, is the way that he connected with me despite those polka dots. So I have that nostalgia has transferred over to the polka dots, that it's hard for me to look at them in a negative light because they just seemed fun when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But it's really because he makes it fun. And so it's very possible that he could have done something else and been even more over. Now, the thing I will add is that I'm too young to remember him as champion, but if we've got polka dots starting out my Dusty Rhodes knowledge, I saw him going up through like when he was in the NWO, and that Dusty was boring.
Oh yeah, sad.
He's got his shaved head, just like this little weird strip of mullet in the back. He's going out. He's not cutting good promos. He's, for some reason, being part of the NWO, if he's supposed to be a manager, if he's supposed to be a talking head, a mouthpiece for them, it didn't work. And it was kind of like, I'd rather hear the wrestlers talk than him. And anything that he'd did after this WWF run just kind of fell flat, where it's like, this is his last chance at the big dance.
But it's a really good point. But part of it is, I think, and I know we'll get into it, is that the WWF run just didn't do him any favors, so it made it really difficult, because the thing is, he started wrestling in 1968. So you got 21 years. So like he is nearing what should be his swan song, and I think so, like, we could sit here and say, maybe he just didn't have to go there. But you know what? Back in 1989, dude, like, that's like not going to, like, you were at Hartford University in Connecticut, which is a It's fine. And now
Fine institution.
fine institution. And now you can go to Harvard. Like, you're gonna go. They want him. It's a great opportunity. Wrestling is still booming. It makes sense that he would go for it, but there was serious damage done. I will say this. We should say this quickly, though. He had an amazing song. See, I keep the song. Yeah. The song it's one of the best, actually. I mean, it's so good, and it actually works for the character. And I mean, and obviously, like, we're not just going to go on and on about the polka dots. Like, there was other things that made this so tough. But it was this great opportunity for him. And what I think is, I just think the truth is, and we'll talk about it, like, I think we can rebook this and make this great for Dusty. But, like, so unlike like when we talked about Piper, I think like rebooking Piper would have really helped like them get through a couple dog years, like 92 and 93, could have made a big difference. I don't know how much Dusty, I think what this comes down to is like, it's almost like Dusty needed Vince more than Vince needed Dusty. Like, I don't know if Dusty could have, like, I don't really know what he could have done for WWF in terms of like changing its success, and its trajectory. I just think he went in there and it just really damaged him. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I think usually I like to talk a little bit more history than we're doing on this show before we get into the actual rebooking, but I almost feel like I'm champing at the bit here to get into the rebooking.
Because I have one big one that I've not shared with you. I have one big one that I'm excited about.
Okay, well, I save it just for just a minute. Because the one thing I want to point out, kind of the last thing about the polka dots, is that it just positions him as lower mid-card guy.
Yes,
he's
exactly.
Goofy, he's silly, he's there to just put on a show, dance, and there are other people who are in that style of a gimmick in this era. Hakeem, the African Dream, even to some degree Coco Beware, which these are both great guys, but you start getting these folks that are, I don't want to call them clowns, but they're there to put on a fun little show. The Bushwhackers are the tag team version of this, where it's like, they're not going to be a threat for the championship ever. Coco Beware's not going to win the championship. He's not even going to fight in the championship, but he's going to put on a good match with a Marty Jannetty on a Superstars. They can headline that type of thing. And you've got more towards the top of the card at this time. You've got $1 Million Man. You've got Mr. Perfect. And $1 Million Man could have been a goofball gimmick like this, except for the fact that maybe that's the version of what Vince McMahon saw himself as. And so it got pushed a little bit further than it could have been under different circumstances. But $1 Million Man is going to be one of the top heels. Randy Savage going back and forth with some of the top baby faces and sometimes some of the top heels, depending on what year it was. You've got Ravishing Rick Rude. You got the Ultimate Warrior. Warrior, if he didn't look so amazing, that could be a goofy gimmick on somebody. But everybody that had the face paint at the time, Demolition, Warrior, these folks had toughness, and they, what could be silly wasn't silly. So the only thing I just wanted to say about that was that because of Dusty's polka dots, it positioned him into the comedy act. If there's going to be a Hillbilly Jim that comes out, here we go. Who's the top possibility for a Dusty Rhodes to go up against? Well, at Macho Man, he obviously went up against him, but not really. It was kind of like this, me and Sapphire and you, doing this 2-person type of thing. A Honky Tonk Man is kind of like top of where you're going to get Dusty Rhodes to go to. So now as we get into this rebooking, I think One thing that I actually really like is the vignettes. I know you kind of don't like where that places him, but I don't I went back and watched a couple, and one in particular, he's at a gas station, and just the charisma he has with it. He just shows the audience how likable he is. And I think there is a disconnect between working at a gas station. I don't know that I want him necessarily just delivering pizzas, but I think kind of an auto mechanic, gas station attendant, plumber, those type of tradesmen. You know, pizza man's like usually a teenager, so I don't know why they got him doing that. But
Yeah.
you know, a butcher or something that's a hard working man.
Totally.
There's a disconnect between that and then him dancing around in a shiny black singlet with polka dots on it and polka dots wrapped around his head. That's more of a clown or a circus performer than it is a working man.
Well, that's my main. I hear you. I mean, my main issue with it is what you touched on. There's just a complete disconnect. I mean, I just think they overcomplicated it. I mean, I think like he could have just been like it could have just been Dusty, the American Man. I mean, that's what he was, right? In NWA, essentially, the common man. It's just cute and precious a little bit. I mean, it's true. Dusty's so charismatic that he pulls it off. I think we're both in agreement. It's just the product that we see in the ring, it just doesn't even make any sense. I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. It just doesn't make it just doesn't make any sense. He's dancing with these dots, and it's like it's just a far departure. I mean, it should be like he should be coming out with like just like how he used to, like just jeans, you know, and like maybe like a shirt with, you know, but you can still see his chest, whatever, or like a little jacket. I mean, there's so many things they could have done, but I think you really touched on it when you're talking about Coco Beware and all these guys. I think he just came at for this to work, Vince has to take a departure. He has to be, because everything's kind of working. So he's like, okay, we're just going to make this another silly character. Dusty Rhodes is not a silly character. I mean, I get like with his voice is like fun to imitate and all that, but what he stands for is actually grounded in a reality that really not many of the wrestlers exhibited back then, right? There's very few. If they really would have stuck to who Dusty was, can you name me a character in 1989 in the WWF that's more like real than him? That's more just like a regular guy. And I think, you know, if they would have done that, it could have worked because he'd really be standing out. Like, who could you compare him to? I can only think of one guy that you could actually compare. If you took Dusty from NWA and just was like, okay, we're just going to, just like they did with AJ Styles, we're basically just going to keep you the same. Is there anyone like him at that time?
Yeah, it's really tough because, you know, just looking over the roster, you see like there's people that are close approximations to portions of Dusty Rhodes, but nobody that's going to be the complete package. Like a Greg the Hammer Valentine might be the wrestling.
But he's just like a wrestler, right? He's just like a technician.
But you know, just having a non-80s body.
Totally.
A big fat head. He's one of those guys where like just his head was just massive, and Dusty had one of those massive heads, but he didn't have the charisma.
Dusty could cut a promo better than anyone.
Yes. And so you've got, you know, Jim Duggan is an approximation of some of the things, but there's no, like, you know, and that's the thing. You could check off 3 of the 5 or 3 of the 10 boxes, but they're not checking off all of the boxes that he brings to the table.
So here's my thing, Luke, and I must say I'm enjoying this. This is fun. I needed this. I didn't realize how much I needed Dusty tonight. Here's who I think, going with what you're saying with Jim Duggan, and, you know, especially Jim Duggan. You know who I would say, but it's at another level? Your man, a guy I like to sometimes annoying, called Terry, Hulk Hogan.
Okay.
To me, they were kind of kindred spirits, but different.
Yes.
Different, no doubt about it. But the still the America thing, the larger than life promo, that to me now it's tricky. How do you get there? How do you book it? It takes, I think, some bold moves to do it. But Hogan Rhodes, which I don't believe ever happened.
No,
am I wrong? I looked into it. I don't think it ever happened.
Not that I know of, unless there was like a weird AWA match that I am not aware
Maybe.
of. You know, occasionally there's some of those, you know, lost to history type of matches, but
nothing notable.
No program, especially in the WWF. There was no notable program. The top of where I think that Dusty got was Macho Man, and
definitely
that's obviously a great, you know, set of matches, but
it was very soapy, as you said, very soap opera.
Right. It wasn't really what we wanted to see. Like, it wasn't Macho Man Randy Savage versus the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. You know, and as you were speaking, like, it kind of clicked in my head that, like, oh, wait a second. He is different than the NWA. Like, because I've thought, you know, the common man, that thing kind of goes through, but there is a difference because he was the American Dream. He was someone that had come from the working class and made it big.
Great.
That's the American dream, Dusty Rhodes, that a son of a plumber can climb the ladder and become the world champion. You know, he's wearing furs. He is not the common man.
Right.
He came from the common man.
It's the American dream. Right. Yeah.
And so for him to come in as the common man, I get it, but you're essentially turning back the clock to his upbringing rather than bringing in Dusty Rhodes. Mm-hmm. When Ric Flair is brought in, he's brought in as Ric Flair, the real world's champion. The robes, the promos, having Bobby Heenan, having Mr. Perfect in the corner, the rhinestones on there. You know, there's just, it's Ric Flair comes in. Dusty Rhodes comes in and they don't go, hey, you be that same guy you were. It's, hey, we have to change you a little bit. You're going to be the common man. The polka dot thing just throw that out. But like, if he's going to be the common man, then he can't be the American dream at the same time. Mm-hmm. Those are conflicting gimmicks.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the big one here. This is where we have come to a fork in the road. And where we see Dusty Rhodes, does he stay the common man the way he was, or is he going to be what he was in NWA, the American dream?
I think he can. I like what you're saying about the American dream. I think what's going to have to happen, though, when you first enter, any huge promotion, the hope is that you can just hit the ground running. And I think if he can hit the ground running, I think he can be the American dream. Definitely. I just think, he did win his first few programs, I believe, like definitely over Honky Tonk, but Savage was the first real big one. And it just didn't put him. Yes, he was over with the fans, but the problem is that he was over with the fans in kind of a cheap way. Mm-hmm. It was because of what he's wearing and because of the song to some degree. And then also people know who he is and all that. And I'm not saying he's still not charismatic and everything, but they're not allowing him to really do something special, do something big. He should have beat Randy Savage. You didn't need Sapphire. She shouldn't have been there, as far as I'm concerned. An interesting character to talk about, for sure. She had her moment, I guess, but it's not necessary. It's Dusty coming in, just like when AJ Styles came in. Cena's right there. All right, so Savage is still like the number 3 guy. Savage is right there. Mm-hmm. They have some great matches. That's another thing. Dusty used to have great matches. They have great matches. They tell stories in the ring. Savage is at a point right now in his career where he could lose to Dusty. And I don't think it would be that big of a deal for him. I think he would have been just fine. But you let Dusty have that big program. And then, yeah, you're telling this amazing story too. How like this is the American dream. You can come in and beat the Macho Man. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I would start it off.
Yeah, so I've made my decision in my head as you were talking, is that he can't be just come in as the common man, because that erases his history. And I'm not going to erase Dusty Rhodes' history, because the history is not just I'm a plumber. He's not a plumber.
Exactly.
He's the son of a plumber. And yes. So the best case scenario with doing that version is it's kind of like a Rocky 5, where he's lost all of his money, he's bad managers or whatever, and so now he's working these tough jobs because someone mismanaged his money and stole all of his millions. That's the best case scenario you can do with the common man. But I think it being American dream. Well, what's the American dream is to make it. Well, he's made it, but he made it in the small pond. Now he's ready to make it in the big ocean of the WWF. He wants to be the big fish in the big pond.
He wants to be champion.
He wants to be champion.
Because he was a 3-time champ. So why wouldn't he want to be champion?
Right. And he's ready to make his mark in the WWF. I have him coming in with I like vignettes, so I have him connecting with those roots. Not just becoming those roots, but connecting with them. So something along the lines where he's got his big fur coat and he's saying, I'm coming up there, but in order to come to the WWF, I got to get back to my roots. I'm wearing furs. I'm driving the big Cadillac. I'm living in the big house. But if I'm going to go there, it's kind of like Rocky IV, to use another Rocky reference. I have to strip away all these pleasantries I have around me, all the yes men, all of the conveniences, and I got to get back to my roots so that I can compete for that world championship. And so that brings him in, and he's then connecting with his roots. His dad was a plumber, so he's going and talking to plumbers again and talking to real people. And that Hard Times promo, just take the spirit of the Hard Times promo, which is, I know you have it tough. I know. I came from that. My family came from that. I made it big. And so what I'm going to do is for you people, I am going to be the WWF champion. And so coming in, I don't mind him having maybe a little program with a Honky Tonk Man or some of those mid-card guys to kind of establish who he is. Sure. But I actually want to put him with some tough people as well. And I think Greg the Hammer Valentine is a good early program for him, because nobody ever says Greg isn't real. He looks real. He looks tough. He's not a goofy gimmick. As long as you don't have the version of him teaming with Honky Tonk Man, right. Just the Hammer. And so I think that's a good entry point for him to come in and have Greg the Hammer Valentine kind of like try to stop him a little bit, like, hey, hold on, I know you from the day, and you're not leapfrogging me in this pecking order. And so that's the first test Dusty has, is I am leapfrogging you, because I've got not just the talent and the skill, I've got the passion and I got the people that you don't have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it actually makes sense not to go right to Savage. Give him a few building blocks, but you're starting to tell a story. They weren't telling a story with Dusty when he came in. They were just putting on a performance. Mm-hmm. So I love all of that. See, I keep thinking I'll just tell you where I want to go, because the truth is, we're only talking about a couple years,
Yes,
most
very,
likely.
very, very little.
Except we'll get to with his son coming in, what maybe could have been there, right? But
Mm-hmm.
basically, we're a little bit, I don't see him. I know we've talked a lot about like 92, 93. I don't really see him even going into there, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
So I want him in Hogan. I think there's such a story there, like the real American versus the American Dream. Now, here's the thing. These are the type of programs they didn't really do. It was very rare they did good guy versus good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Hogan versus Warriors different because it's like superhero against superhero. It's a little different. They both had their fans, but it was like two comic book heroes going against each other. But with this, Dusty is, and I don't mean to be leapfrogging, and I'm just telling you what I want to. You might not even want to explore this, but Dusty Hogan offers a lot of interesting possibilities. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying Warrior still gets the belt. It's fine. I think to take that away from history seems weird because it's still one of the greatest moments. It's still one of the most exciting matches ever, right? So you keep that. But then we've talked, like things started kind of going downhill really right when Warrior got the belt anyway. I would love to find a way where we don't have Sergeant Slaughter winning the title. Mm-hmm. I would love to find a way where we have Dusty versus Hogan at WrestleMania 7. I think it's really the only time to do it. I understand what was going on in the country and how they were kind of playing to, like the Gulf War and all that. But the truth is, like, Hogan Slaughter wasn't that much of a draw. I don't see why Hogan Rhodes can't be as big or a bigger draw than that. I like how their styles mesh with each other. I think it would be an old-fashioned fight. But Dusty was sneaky, agile in the ring. Obviously, not even that sneaky, actually. That's where I want to go. What do you think about that? That's because that's what Dusty didn't have, right? He had he didn't have his moment. Dusty Hogan is a moment.
Yes, it's very difficult for me to look back at the era it is. And I'm a Hogan guy, but just even thinking about, here's my champion, Hulk Hogan. And who does he normally have his matches with? It's the Beast of the Week. Mm-hmm. It's, Earthquake. It's, One Man Gang. It's King Kong Bundy. It's Andre the Giant. It's because he's a big man. He's going to tower over Dusty Rhodes. And so it's hard for me to look at Dusty Rhodes as a threat. And so to me, the absolute pinnacle of what he can be in WWF is either competing for the championship with Savage having the championship, or even a possibility of sticking him around long enough that he's Sergeant Slaughter is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah.
But then it's like Hogan got, but I mean, of course Hogan I think Dusty Slaughter could have actually worked. I just feel like the idea of Hogan just like not being there for it. I mean, as special as Mr. Nanny was and all that, I guess I don't know if I agree though. I just think like what I'm proposing, and this is what like Vince couldn't do with Dusty, the whole product wasn't very bold back then. Mm-hmm. It was effective, at times like wildly successful, but it didn't like take a chance. It didn't try to, and what I mean by take a chance is like kind of like change what we're doing. Like put all of a sudden, the script has changed a bit. Mm-hmm. Because what ended up actually happening, right? The script ran dry and then they had to do the new generation. So what if they just like threw something else against the wall? And it's finally like the fans. I mean, I guess you had this with a bit with the Warrior, but I think this is different because it's more like, the real American is actually meeting, the American Dream, where the fans now might actually not want to cheer for Hogan as much. And maybe now it's like Hogan's having to go against a Rocky Balboa type.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give this up. I don't have to have this. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna plead and plead, but I just think it was, and maybe it's not Mania. Maybe I'm pushing it that way. Maybe it's SummerSlam, right? Maybe rather than the doomed Hogan Warrior against Sergeant Slaughter and his, guys, maybe they build something then. But I just feel like there was a really interesting story to say. Like, you say you're the real American, but I'm the one living I'm the one who had to actually fight for it. I'm the one who had to fight for the dream. You were just given it because of your looks. Like, it's just like if I almost just wonder, could have Hogan handled it? Like, if Dusty could drop the type of promo, like a Hard Times promo, could Hogan handle that? Like, did he have the skill to be able to combat that? I think it would be kind of fascinating.
It's tough because I do think that you run the risk, especially as we're getting into the late 90s or late 80s, early 90s, of people getting tired of Hogan and just cheering for somebody that's not Hogan. And at best, I could see this being a one-off type of, all right, I'll give you your shot.
Okay.
It's not even a SummerSlam. It's kind of a, maybe a Royal Rumble before the actual Rumble type of thing. Or a Survivor Series type of match of like your team versus my team. It's just, I just don't see it with Hogan.
I don't think Hogan loses. So let me be clear on that. I don't think Hogan loses. I don't see Dusty pinning Hulk Hogan. That's a stretch. All right. So look, I mean, that's where I was going with. I was even thinking like it could start with like a Hogan Rhodes tag team. Like, what if it was Hogan and Rhodes at SummerSlam? Hogan Dusty.
I could see that
against Sergeant Slaughter and not, But with that said, what are you thinking more? So you're thinking it's more like a big money program between Dusty and Savage?
Yeah, so I'm thinking that we're going to have to build him to if he's actually going to chase this championship, he's going to have somebody to go against that actually makes sense. And so who's that going to be? And I think he worked well with Savage. Obviously that program ended with kind of a dud where it's kind of like, okay, Savage is just, beating him up. But overall, it's fun, it's memorable. I think that we're going to have some sort of buildup. And this is the thing. He's not too far off of coming in than Ric Flair is. And so if we can get Dusty to cross over just a little bit, you can have, even if he had like this, just the briefest of reigns as champion later on, and you have the real world's champion Ric Flair coming in and taking it from him, or at least fighting with him for it, you can get maybe a little bit of, look who's here, look who's back, it's Ric Flair, your nemesis, and capture some of that magic again in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, they were only a year off from that. I'm okay with that. I mean, I guess the question then becomes, what are we doing? I mean, unless we want to like rebook Flair and Flair comes earlier, but I think that's too much. Flair basically came right when Dusty left. I mean, or not right when, maybe like 6 months after Dusty left. Mm-hmm. But, look, the truth is, we could do this thing where not too much changes with Dusty, because I liked the one thing that I think was cool was when his Dustin Rhodes joined and they did a promo together at the Rumble, and he premiered at the Rumble in 91. I mean, I'm willing to, I still think you can get a one-off. You can get a Hogan Dusty thing in there. But even if it's just like what you're saying, I hear you. It's not really a WrestleMania match. It's not super believable that would happen. I still think there's something we could do with them. But and by doing that, we're keeping Dusty's character going a bit. Mm-hmm. His son came. So by the time his son comes in, Dusty's changed his character. Right? He's not wearing the polka dots anymore. Now he's kind of like, now they're trying to build like the Dusty that we knew previously. So, and then it just ended. They left. Like they left shortly after the Rumble. Like that was it. Keep them. If you could just keep them there, because you did make me think of something pretty awesome. At some point, Ric Flair comes back and he beats the living, out of Dustin. I when I'm on here, I never want to curse. So that was my little pause there. Tar. Yes, he beats the living tar out of him. I think, right? I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, if that's a great way to get Flair, I mean, literally that could be like one of the first things Flair ever does.
Yes, I think that Flair had a pretty short run in the WWF as well. And I think you can elongate it if you can have some Dusty stuff. And so Dustin Rhodes is a great way of having a feud there. I actually think that you could go either way on this, that Flair beats up Dusty and incapacitates him. And therefore it's a way to kind of elevate Dustin a little bit. Now he's got to go against
That's exactly what you do. Yeah.
Ric Flair and kind of push him there. And that way Dusty can be not just, in his corner at first, because obviously I'm going to have Ric Flair beat Dustin and Dustin's just not quite ready. So now it becomes Dusty helping Dustin through growing to be the return match where they can actually get there down the road, and that gives him opportunities to go against other people at that level. If we're talking 91 and late 91, early 92, there's different people that Dustin could be testing himself against. Although, gosh, even in those years, we're starting to get some pretty big guys, and the business is about to change a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, throw him with Greg Valentine again. There we go. Just every time I need something, I'll just throw the hammer.
When you need a hammer, yeah.
Yeah, this is a tough rebooking in the sense of how do you squeeze a little bit more time out of a man that's been wrestling since 1968. Yeah,
I think that's the issue, because you mentioned just what I was thinking is that, like, if we start bringing, and you and I have gone over 92 and 93 more than anything. I mean, but to squeeze him in, you can do it. You just got to change some things, because when Flair came in, I just actually watched. Have you ever watched Flair's debut? It's unbelievable when Bobby the Brain brings him in. It's on like a Superstars or something. It's so good. It's just everything that Flair did I would say through WrestleMania 8 was so good, was so right on the money, that throwing Dusty in there, you're going to just have to get creative with it. And I like the idea of him taking out Dusty. I actually think Dusty maybe has to go off screen for a little bit. Maybe he's doing some booking at that point, find a way to, because obviously it was kind of a flop when they decided to take the polka dots off and bring Dusty back to just his kind of original kind of character. But maybe sometimes you got to just put someone out, take them out in dramatic fashion, and then let them make that amazing comeback to that, spectacular pop. Maybe that's what you do with it. But it's just the question is when is this? I mean, I think it would have to be after WrestleMania 8.
Well, something I really want to see Ric Flair at WrestleMania 9. Caesar's Palace. Doesn't that feel like a Ric Flair event?
Yeah.
And if you have Dusty Rhodes making his comeback there.
What about if it's Dusty Rhodes' retirement match?
Ooh.
That's like a legit retirement match because at that point it's 20. We're talking 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's been wrestling 25 years. So maybe that's like that works. I love that. I mean, we've done amazing work with WrestleMania 9. I'm all for that. I think it's just about like, so basically what you're saying is like we are, because I was thinking, do the polka dots even happen?
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying they do, like that we just kind of keep it the way it was for.
No, I'm getting rid of the polka dots.
I don't think the polka dots ever have to happen.
No, I'm bringing him in as the American Dream who says
same song, right?
Same song.
Okay, thank God.
And his connection to the common man is the fact that he's been to the top, and now he's connecting with his roots to be able to go to an even higher peak. He's claimed one mountain, but he sees an even bigger when he sees Everest, and so now he's connecting with his common man roots. So we got the common man song out. He's connected with those folks, and eyeing his way for the championship. That's how he's coming in mid '89, and so he's going to have these matches. He's going to have these programs. Whether it's Greg the Hammer Valentine, Honky Tonk Man. Some Macho Man stuff. The problem really is about the championship is that he comes in at the wrong time.
Yeah, to get a championship.
A championship because he comes in after WrestleMania 5. WrestleMania 5, Hulk Hogan gets that title back from Randy Savage. And then by the next WrestleMania, Warrior takes it. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. Who is the Intercontinental title after the Warrior?
Who got that after him?
Right? Because, and I guess...
Was it Bret Hart that got it right after
No.
him?
Maybe Mr. Perfect. A dusty Mr. Perfect feud.
Perfect. Texas Tornado had it.
Yeah, and then I think Perfect had it at some point because he lost it to Bret Hart. Mm-hmm. But if we could somehow get the IC, and I think we could, they always play a little hot potato with that. If we can get the Intercontinental title on Rhodes, that could really get him through to 91.
Mr. Perfect. That's a good one where he can go against Mr. Perfect. Because
those would be some nice matches, by the way. I would have loved. Oh,
yeah, because Perfect drops it to Texas Tornado, gets it back from Texas Tornado. So there's like a...
So why don't you just drop it to Dusty instead of Texas Tornado? Like, with all due respect to Texas Tornado, like he was basically it was my favorite action figure I ever had, but it was basically a bust. Why not have Dusty beat Perfect? Maybe Perfect beats him again. Brett still gets it. But if you can just get a little gold around Dusty's waist, and then what I'm thinking right now is, what if we do Dusty Dustin win the tag team championship at some point?
That's good too, yeah.
So now you're getting more gold on him, and then you're building it to when Flair comes. Because for Flair to take out Dusty and for us to really care, there has to be a level of success that Dusty has achieved. Mm-hmm. So, and it's we can't give everyone the belt. We were able to do it for Piper, but it just doesn't always work out. And you're right, Dusty came at the wrong time. If Dusty came, let's say at the same age, so he's not much older, but if he was able to come in when you had I don't know, 94, could have Dusty beaten Shawn Michaels for the title or something? Maybe. But I think he just came, there was just too many megastars. And I think it was just too hard to get that belt on him.
Yeah, so I like that. I like the Intercontinental thing. So this is what is going to happen in my world. So everything I had said before, he gets the Intercontinental Championship. And he's not going to be able to keep it all the way up until when Ric Flair enters the promotion, because Ric Flair's not entering until 91, but he can get close, get close to that time, and maybe he says, I'm gunning for the big belt, and so or vacates it because of that, or loses it, however, and then his son comes in, he goes, that just shifts his goal a little bit. Where
Exactly.
he doesn't have to go. He goes, you know what? My son he came to me and he says, I want to be the lineage. I want to be in the lineage of Dusty Rhodes, baby. I want him to, and I said to him, baby, you're going to be a champion with your daddy. And so they go for the tag team championship. And
Luke, can I just say, I've never said this on the air, but it's true. I think you are a very, very, very funny, talented stand-up comedian that I've had the pleasure of seeing quite a few times. What would it take for me? Because I would never want to mess with your art, and I mean that. But like, what would it take for you to do a set in the Dusty Rhodes voice, like
an entire set? So you're not even just saying like, here's an act out where I just include it in something that isn't related to Dusty Rhodes.
Oh yeah, no. It's just it's your material.
Yeah.
It's just like, but you're just doing it. You're throwing in some babies and all that, but it's basically your set, and you are. I'm not saying like in like a Netflix. You don't do that for like a Netflix special, but for like a 15-minute spot at Gotham, it's all Dusty, baby.
Phew, boy. Well, that's. I think that you know what I need. I need assurances.
There's no romance.
That I'm not.
That you're not going to be taken out.
I'm not going to be taken out. That I'm not going to have to go put on polka dots myself.
Right. Exactly.
Because somebody important watched me and goes, "What is this fool doing?"
I was just saying it's good stuff. But anyway, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
but yeah, I'm liking where we're going with this.
All right. And so that's a great way for him to kind of shift his goal, but still have it be the same goal of going for a championship. That gets him to Ric Flair entering and seeing Ric Flair get that belt and saying, you know what, instead of me doing this, I'm going to help my son get to that. His son, Dusty, gets taken out completely. Dustin can't, gets beaten. And so then we've got this. I like the idea of him being out for just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that it doesn't have to be that long. But if you're looking at even, I actually see him coming back at the Royal Rumble 92. So he's out for, the second part of 91. And then that keeps... You can kind of keep Ric Flair a little bit around because why did Ric Flair leave? Because he was going to be dropping down the card. Mm-hmm. Vince McMahon said, you can stay, but you're not going to be competing for this championship anymore. You're going to be dropping down the card. But can you keep Ric Flair if you say you're going to have this major program with Dusty and it's going to be a loser leaves town match at WrestleMania 9? It's going to be Caesar Palace. It's going to be Las Vegas. It's going to be the big deal showcase for you guys. And that is so Royal Rumble prior to that, Royal Rumble 92, Dusty makes his surprise return in the match and tosses Ric Flair out of the 30-man Royal Rumble. And that sets them up.
You mean 93, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. 93. Yes.
Cool.
93. Of that Royal Rumble. So we get through 92.
I love it. Yeah.
And he's gone the second half of 92.
Yeah.
And Ric Flair thrown out. Then it's like, I'm coming for you. And I'll put my career on the line after what you did to my son, after what you did to me, after what all those things you did to me, baby. I'm going to make sure that you're going to pay for it. And if I have to put my entire career, my entire life on the line to get it, we're going to get it. And so that's the match. And I think in some ways that's a good swan song for Dusty.
Yeah, Dusty should lose that match.
Yeah, he loses the match and he has to go away.
Yeah, I think, well, the beauty of that, and we've talked about this before, is, what certain matches can do for you, the power it gives you. Dusty can leave, or he can do whatever he wants after that. If they put on an amazing match, I'm sure they would. If the fans want him back, he'll come back. Mm-hmm. I hear you. It might not make sense for him to, if we're looking at what like 93, 94, 95, entails, but I mean, the way he left the WWF was crazy because it was like a whimper.
A
It,
very,
it was,
yeah. And this
it
is a
was like,
big time program we can get him
yeah,
on.
exactly. And then if that's it for him, that's it for him. But what I'm thinking is it will give him, you'd like to think it will give him more power to when he goes back to WCW,
Yeah.
because maybe he can still continue that quest to get the title. Him and Flair might very well, they probably would run into each other again. Yeah, that works for me. I think well, the amazing thing about him too, and that we haven't talked about this, is like what's great about Dusty, if forgetting the rebooking for a second, this rebooking never happens. At the very least, Dusty did end up putting together this amazing legacy with what he did with NXT. And that was kind of his swan song, right?
Yes.
But I just think he can have both. So if WrestleMania 9 is his last moment really as an active wrestler there, that's just a great way to finally give it justice. And then he can still come back and do all the good he did.
Well, you know what? I'm going to amend my WrestleMania 9 match just a little bit. It's still a loser leaves town match, but we're going to have a killer match. Just Dusty gives it all and he wins because Ric Flair doesn't want to drop down the card anyway. This was the last payday of like coaxing him to stay a little bit longer so that he didn't leave. And so he still wants to go back to WCW. So Ric Flair loses. And Dusty has this gigantic moment of winning. The people are going banana. And they are just, it's a feel-good moment that you have for WrestleMania 9, right in the middle of the whole program. The place is going crazy. But it just took so much out of him. He says to the crowd, I've given you all I can give. It took every drop of my blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Everything that my father taught me as a plumber. It took all of that, and that's it. I can't go on. And so then you just move him to a backstage role after that.
Yeah. No, when he ends on, I would do it the night after Mania. I would do it on Raw. But yeah, I love that. And he ends on a killer promo. And the main thing we're doing here is this. I mean, like, we're just giving this man, this legend, like some integrity, like that he just didn't have. And it's okay. You don't always get to the top of the mountaintop, but he comes pretty damn close. He has big money feuds. Our next times that we talk and hang out, even offline, I'm gonna still find ways to throw in my desire for Hogan Rhodes. I'm still not satisfied.
Look, baby, if you can get that
part of it,
then the People's Champion, the original Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, baby, he will come for you, and he will take.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
What you gonna do, brother? So that's that. Hey, I couldn't be more opposed to the Hogan match. But that being said, I always listen to your ideas.
What's interesting about Dusty is this one was challenging, and I think it was challenging for us because it was I think it was like very challenging for them, and especially for Dusty. I think he came at the wrong time. He got the wrong gimmick. So it's hard when so much goes wrong. It takes a lot to have to get someone even to a place where you can look at it without cringing. And I think we did that.
Yes, I think we absolutely did that. We gave him dignity.
Yes.
I think he already had integrity. I think we gave him dignity.
I think we gave him dignity, yes.
Dignity on the way out, because we didn't give him a gimmick, saddle him with a gimmick or even a look that he has to get over himself. We just let him be himself. We give him some opportunities. We give him some gold. We give him this great way to leave. Man, I can't think of a better way for them to leave than WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas, giving it its all. He sends Ric Flair out of the company, and he rides off into the sunset himself.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say, yes, I agree with you. I think what we also, the interesting thing that I think is kind of fascinating to me about all this is that, like, it's still maybe this is what like Sting was so afraid of for so many years going to Vince. Like, maybe Dusty would have been better off just not ever going, if we're being honest, right? But we made it so he was able to still achieve it, even though it didn't come nearly as easy to him as his NWA run did. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's not always easy for these guys to go to different leagues. It's just like ball players. Like, when a ball player goes to a different team, sometimes it's just really hard for them to recapture the magic. But I think we come pretty darn close.
Yes, for sure. Well, Andrew, I think we did it.
I think we did it.
The best we could possibly do with the tail end of Dusty's career. You know, he did wrestle a little bit beyond this.
Yeah, no, nothing would top. I mean, I love a 5-star match against Flair.
Yeah, that's
at 9.
That's
amazing.
That's the swan song. That's the way to end it all. But yeah, Andrew, it's good to have you on the show again. And I think before season 1 ends, we're going to have you probably on the show again.
And and it will always be a pleasure. And I will always be excited to do it. Thank you so much, man. This is great.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Do you agree with our booking? Would you do it differently? Well, I'm at Comedian Luke on all social media platforms, and you can actually at Rebooking TT on Twitter and Rebooking the Territory on Facebook. You can also find out about future episodes there. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and please give us a 5-star review. It truly helps.